Marcus Chen sat on the cold concrete steps of the public library, watching people walk by without looking at him. 3 years ago, these same people would have paid hundreds of dollars just to hear him play piano for 2 hours. Now they crossed the street to avoid him. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from his torn jacket. Marcus pulled his thin blanket closer around his shoulders. His stomach made loud noises. He had not eaten anything in 2 days. Priu. $20 he got from playing music on the street corner yesterday was already gone. He spent it on a cheap meal and a night at the homeless shelter. Marcus looked at his hands. They were dirty now with broken nails and cuts from sleeping rough. But he could still remember when these hands were his pride. When he was 8 years old, his mother took him to piano lessons. The teacher said Marcus was special, very special. By age 10, he was playing concerts for hundreds of people. By 15, he was famous around the world. The newspapers called him a genius. They said he was the best young piano player anyone had ever seen. Marcus remembered the first time he played at Carnegie Hall in New York. He was only 17 years old. The audience stood up and clapped for 10 minutes. His mother cried happy tears in the front row. His father took so many pictures that the camera flash made Marcus blink. After that night, everything changed. Music schools wanted him. Concert halls booked him years in advance. Rich people invited him to play at their parties. Marcus traveled to London, Paris, Tokyo, and Vienna. He played for kings and presidents. Famous musicians wanted to work with him. Record companies gave him millions of dollars. Marcus bought a big house for his parents. He had expensive cars and beautiful clothes. His apartment in Manhattan cost more money each month than most people made in a year. But Marcus did not care about the money. He only cared about the music. When he sat at a piano, the whole world disappeared. There was only him and the beautiful sounds his fingers could make. The piano was his best friend. It never judged him. It never asked for anything. It just gave back whatever emotions Marcus put into it. When he was happy, the music danced. When he was sad, the piano cried with him. When he felt powerful, the music could shake the walls. For 15 years, Marcus lived this amazing life. He played over 2,000 concerts. He made 20 albums. Music magazines put his picture on their covers. Young piano students around. The world tried to play like him. Music teachers used his recordings to show their students what perfect piano playing sounded like. But then came the night that changed everything. Marcus was driving home from a concert in Boston. It was late and it was raining hard. He was tired but happy. The concert had gone perfectly. The audience loved every song. After the show, a little girl came backstage with her mother. She asked Marcus to sign her piano book. She told him she wanted to be just like him when she grew up. Marcus was thinking about that little girl when the truck ran the red light. He woke up in the hospital 3 days later. His head hurt badly. His left arm was in a cast. But the worst news was still coming. The doctor was a kind older man with gentle eyes. He sat down next to Marcus's bed and spoke quietly. The accident had damaged the nerves in Marcus's left hand. Some feeling might come back with time, but it would never be the same. The doctor explained that Marcus might have trouble moving his fingers normally. The fine control he needed for piano playing might be gone forever. Marcus did not believe it at first. When the cast came off 6 weeks later, he went straight to his piano. He tried to play a simple song he had learned when he was 5 years old. His left hand felt heavy and clumsy. The fingers moved too slowly. Some of them did not move at all when he told them to. He practiced every day for hours. He worked with the best hand doctors and therapists. He spent all his savings on treatments. But nothing helped enough. Marcus could still play simple songs, but the magic was gone. The speed was gone. The perfect control was gone. Worse than the physical problems was the fear that grew in his mind. Every time he sat at a piano, he remembered the accident. His hands would shake. His heart would beat fast. Sweat would run down his face. The doctors called it anxiety. Marcus called it the end of his dreams. Concert halls started canceling his shows. Record companies stopped calling. The money ran out quickly. Medical bills took everything he had saved. He had to sell his apartment, his cars, and finally even his precious piano. His parents tried to help, but they were old and did not have much money. His few real friends stayed loyal, but Marcus was too ashamed to accept their help. He felt like he had let everyone down. The little girl who wanted to be like him, the music students who looked up to him, the audiences who trusted him to give them something beautiful. Marcus started drinking to stop the pain in his heart. The drinking made everything worse. He lost the small teaching job he had found. He could not pay rent on even a tiny apartment. One cold morning, he woke up on a park bench and realized he was homeless. The first winter on the streets almost killed him. Marcus learned where to find free food and safe places to sleep. He learned which police officers would help and which ones would just move him along. He learned to be invisible, to not make eye contact, to not expect kindness from strangers. Sometimes, late at night in the shelter, Marcus would dream about playing piano again. He would wake up moving his fingers like he was playing a beautiful song. Then reality would hit him, and the sadness would come rushing back. Now, sitting on the library steps, Marcus watched a mother walk by with her young daughter. The little girl was carrying a piano lesson book. She reminded him of the girl in Boston, the one who wanted to be like him. Marcus wondered if that girl still played piano, or if she had heard what happened to her hero. The sun was setting, and Marcus needed to find a place to sleep. Tomorrow he would try again to find some way to earn money for food. Maybe he could clean car windows at traffic lights. Maybe someone would give him a few dollars for sweeping their sidewalk. Marcus stood up slowly. His body hurt from sleeping on hard surfaces. He picked up his backpack, which held everything he owned in the world. As he walked away from the library, he passed a music store. In the window was a beautiful black piano, shiny and perfect. For just a moment, Marcus let himself remember what it felt like to make music that could make people cry happy tears. Then he kept walking into the night. The cold wind cut through Marcus's thin jacket as he walked down the busy street. His stomach felt like it was eating itself from the inside. He had not had a real meal in 2 days. Yesterday, he found half a sandwich in a trash can behind a deli. This morning, the church gave out free coffee and a small piece of bread, but that was 8 hours ago. Marcus stopped walking and leaned against a lamppost. His legs felt weak. The world seemed to spin a little bit. He knew these were signs that his body needed food soon. He had learned these warning signals during his 3 years on the streets. Around him, people hurried past carrying shopping bags and talking on expensive phones. The smell of food came from every direction. A hot dog cart on the corner made his mouth water. A pizza shop across the street had a line of customers waiting for fresh slices. But Marcus had no money, not even $1. He reached into his pocket and counted his coins for the 3rd time today. 37 cents. Not enough for anything. This morning he had tried playing his small harmonica on the street corner, hoping people would drop some money in his hat. But it was too cold, and people walked by quickly without stopping. Marcus started walking again, looking for any opportunity to earn some money. Maybe someone needed help carrying heavy bags. Maybe a store owner needed someone to sweep the sidewalk. He was not too proud anymore to ask for any kind of work. That was when he saw Café Luna. The restaurant sat on the corner of 5th and Main Street, with big windows that let Marcus see inside. Warm light glowed from beautiful lamps hanging from the ceiling. Well-dressed people sat at tables covered with white cloth. Waiters in black uniforms carried plates of food that looked like works of art. Marcus pressed his face closer to the window. He could see people laughing and talking while they ate. A man in an expensive suit was cutting into a thick steak. A woman in pearls was eating what looked like the most delicious pasta Marcus had ever seen. Everyone looked warm and happy and full. But what caught Marcus's attention was not the food or the people. In the far corner of the restaurant, almost hidden behind some plants, sat an old upright piano. It was not fancy like the grand pianos Marcus used to play. The wood was dark brown and looked like it had not been polished in a long time. But it was a piano. Marcus stared at the instrument and felt something wake up inside his chest. Something that had been sleeping for a long time. His fingers began to move slightly, like they were remembering how to touch keys and make music. He thought about all the times music had saved him before. When he was a lonely child, the piano was his friend. When his parents fought, he would go to his room and play until the angry voices stopped. When he felt scared or sad or confused, music always made sense. Maybe, just maybe, music could save him again. Marcus walked around to the front entrance of Café Luna. The door was heavy glass with golden handles that probably cost more than he used to spend on groceries in a month. Through the glass, he could see a man in a black suit standing behind a small desk. This must be the person who decided where people could sit. Marcus looked at his reflection in the glass door. His hair was long and messy. His clothes were dirty and had holes in them. His shoes were held together with tape. He looked exactly like what he was, a homeless man who had not had a shower in a week. He almost turned around and walked away. These people would never let someone like him inside their beautiful restaurant. They would probably call the police if he even tried to go in. But his stomach made another loud, painful noise, and he looked at the piano again. Marcus took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy door. The warm air inside hit him like a soft blanket. It smelled like fresh bread and coffee and flowers. The sounds were different too. Quiet music playing from hidden speakers, the gentle noise of conversation, the soft clink of expensive glasses. Everyone in the restaurant seemed to move in slow motion, like they had all the time in the world. This was a different world from the cold, fast, harsh place where Marcus lived now. The man behind the desk looked up when Marcus walked in. His name tag said, Vincent Rossi, manager. He was about 50 years old with gray hair slicked back. His suit looked like it cost more money than Marcus had seen in 3 years. Vincent's eyes traveled from Marcus's broken shoes to his dirty jacket to his unwashed hair. His face changed from polite smile to something else. Something cold. Excuse me, Vincent said in a voice that was not really asking for an excuse. This is a private establishment. I think you might be looking for the mission down the street. Marcus felt his face get hot with shame. But he thought about the piano, and he thought about his empty stomach, and he found the courage to speak. Sir, Marcus said, trying to make his voice sound steady. I know this might sound strange, but I was wondering if I could play your piano. He pointed toward the corner where the old instrument sat. Just for a little while, in exchange for a meal. Vincent's eyebrows went up like Marcus had just asked to fly to the moon. Behind the manager, Marcus could see waiters starting to notice the conversation. Some of them stopped what they were doing to watch. You want to what? Vincent asked, and Marcus could hear that he was trying not to laugh. I'm a musician, Marcus said, and the words felt strange in his mouth. He had not called himself that in a long time. I know I don't look like much right now, but I can play. If you let me play just one song, and if people like it, maybe you could give me something to eat. Vincent looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he looked around the restaurant at his customers who were starting to pay attention to what was happening at the front door. A musician, Vincent repeated slowly. You. He gestured at Marcus's appearance. Want to play piano in my restaurant for food? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir, just one song. If you don't like it, I'll leave right away, I promise. The manager was quiet for another moment. Marcus could see him thinking. He could also see some of the restaurant customers watching now, waiting to see what would happen. Finally, Vincent smiled. But it was not a kind smile. You know what? Vincent said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. This could be interesting. We don't usually have entertainment during dinner. He walked around his desk and put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Not in a friendly way, but like he was controlling where Marcus could go. Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent announced to the restaurant in a voice that made everyone stop eating and look up. We have a special treat tonight. A real musician wants to play for us. Marcus heard some people whisper to each other. Someone giggled. He saw a woman at a nearby table pull out her phone and point it in his direction. Vincent walked Marcus toward the piano, still talking loudly. I'm sure you'll all enjoy this very much. It's not every day we get such unique entertainment. As they got closer to the piano, Marcus could see it more clearly. The wood was scratched and faded. Some of the Keys looked yellow with age. He wondered when someone had last played it, and if it was even in tune, but it was still a piano, and Marcus had not touched piano keys in over a year. Vincent pulled out the piano bench and gestured for Marcus to sit down. "There you go, maestro," he said with that same cold smile. "Show us what you can do." Marcus sat down slowly. The bench was hard and wobbly. He looked out at the restaurant full of people who were all staring at him now. Some looked curious, some looked amused, some looked uncomfortable, like they were watching something that might be embarrassing. Marcus lifted his hands toward the keys, then stopped. What if his damaged hand would not work at all? What if he had forgotten how to play? What if he made a fool of himself in front of all these people? But then his stomach made another painful noise, and Marcus remembered why he was here. He needed food, and music was the only skill he had left. He placed his fingers on the keys and got ready to find out if he could still make magic happen. Vincent stood behind Marcus with his arms crossed, looking down at the homeless man sitting at his piano. The manager's smile was getting bigger, but not in a nice way. It was the kind of smile people get when they think they are about to see something funny happen to someone else. "Well," Vincent said loudly, "we're all waiting. Don't be shy now." Marcus looked around the restaurant. Every person had stopped eating and was staring at him. Some people looked curious, but many looked like they were expecting him to fail. A few were still holding up their phones, ready to record whatever happened next. At a table near the window, a man in an expensive suit whispered something to his wife, and she covered her mouth to hide her laugh. Two young women at another table were taking pictures of Marcus with their phones and sending them to their friends. Marcus felt sweat start to form on his forehead, even though the restaurant was not that warm. His heart was beating fast. This was too much like the anxiety he felt every time he tried to play piano after the accident. The fear that he would fail. The fear that people would see he was not special anymore. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly, starting to stand up. Maybe this was a bad idea. "Oh no," Vincent said, putting his hand on Marcus's shoulder and pushing him back down onto the bench. "You can't change your mind now. You asked for a chance to play. Everyone here wants to hear what you can do." Vincent looked around the restaurant and raised his voice even more. "Ladies and gentlemen, our street musician is getting nervous. Maybe we should encourage him." A few people clapped, but it did not sound supportive. It sounded mocking, like they were clapping for a circus animal that was about to do a trick. "Play something," called out a man from across the room. "We don't have all night." "Yeah, let's hear this great music," said a woman at a nearby table. Her voice was sarcastic, like she already knew Marcus would sound terrible. Marcus looked down at the piano keys. They were more yellow than he had thought, and some of them had scratches and stains. This piano had probably not been tuned in years. Even a professional musician would have trouble making it sound good. But Marcus was not a professional musician anymore. He was just a homeless man who was hungry and desperate. "What's wrong?" Vincent asked. "Having second thoughts? Maybe you're not really a musician after all." Some people in the restaurant laughed. Marcus felt his face turn red with embarrassment. He thought about getting up and running out of the restaurant. He could find some other way to get food. Maybe he could go through trash cans behind restaurants. Maybe someone would give him $1 on the street. But then he looked around the restaurant again and saw something that made him angry. These people were all warm and comfortable and full of good food. They had money and nice clothes and probably beautiful homes to go back to tonight. And they thought it was funny to watch a hungry man be humiliated. They thought he was just some crazy homeless person who did not know any better. They thought they were better than him because they had money and he did not. But they did not know who he really was. They did not know that he had once played for presidents and kings. They did not know that thousands of people had once paid just to hear him play. They did not know that he had been called one of the greatest musicians of his generation. Marcus put his hands back on the keys. "What song do you want to hear?" he asked Vincent. The manager laughed. "Oh, I don't know." "How about Chopsticks? That's about your level, right?" More people laughed. Marcus heard someone say, This is going to be painful to listen to. A woman near the front called out, "Play Happy Birthday, that's easy enough." "Yeah," said another voice. "Keep it simple, buddy." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about all the beautiful music he used to play. Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff. Pieces that could make people cry or give them chills or transport them to another world. These people expected him to play children's songs badly on an out-of-tune piano, while they laughed at him. They wanted to see him fail so they could feel better about themselves. Marcus decided he would not give them what they expected. "I'll play Chopin," he said quietly. "What?" Vincent leaned closer. "Speak up." "I said I'll play Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major." The restaurant got very quiet. Then someone snorted with laughter. "Chopin," said the man in the expensive suit. "This should be good." "Does he even know how to pronounce it?" asked his wife. Vincent's smile got even wider. "Chopin. Well, this is ambitious. Are you sure you don't want to start with something easier? Like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star?" The whole restaurant erupted in laughter. People were pointing at Marcus now and shaking their heads like they could not believe what they were hearing. "He thinks he's going to play classical music," one person said. "On that old piano," said another. "This is going to be a disaster." Someone should record this, said a young woman. "This is going to be hilarious." Marcus felt the old fear creeping back into his chest. His left hand started to shake a little bit. What if he really could not play anymore? What if the damage to his nerves was too bad? What if he started the piece and his hand just stopped working? What if he really was just a crazy homeless man who thought he could still do something he used to be good at? Vincent was enjoying this, more and more. He walked around the piano so everyone could see him clearly. "Folks, you're about to witness something special," he announced. "Our friend here thinks he's going to play Chopin, classical music, on our piano." He paused for effect. "I think we should all listen very carefully. This is probably going to be the worst piano playing any of us have ever heard." The laughter got louder. Someone started clapping sarcastically. Marcus heard people making bets about how long he would be able to play before he gave up. 10 seconds, said one person. "I say he won't even get through the first line," said another. "He'll probably break the piano," said a third voice. Marcus looked down at his hands on the keys. His left hand was still shaking. The damaged nerves felt strange and disconnected, like the hand belonged to someone else. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was just fooling himself. Maybe the Marcus Chen who could make beautiful music was gone forever, and all that was left was this broken, homeless man who could not even remember what it felt like to play well. But then Marcus thought about the little girl in Boston who had asked for his autograph. He thought about his mother crying happy tears at Carnegie Hall. He thought about all the times music had been the only thing that made sense in his life. And he thought about how hungry he was. Marcus took a deep breath and placed his fingers in the starting position for Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The restaurant was still buzzing with laughter and conversation and the sound of phones recording. He looked out at all the faces staring at him. Wealthy, comfortable people who thought they were about to see a homeless man embarrass himself for their entertainment. They had no idea what was about to happen. Marcus pressed down on the first key, and the note rang out clear and pure in the crowded restaurant. Then the second note and the third. And slowly the laughter began to die away. Vincent looked at Marcus sitting at the piano bench and felt a rush of excitement. This was going to be perfect entertainment for his customers. They came to Café Luna for expensive food and a sophisticated atmosphere. But tonight, they were going to get something even better. A show. The manager had been running this restaurant for 15 years. He had seen all kinds of people try to get free food. Some begged. Some made up sad stories. Some offered to work. But nobody had ever been bold enough to claim they could play classical music in exchange for a meal. Vincent looked around his restaurant and saw that every customer was watching now. This was exactly what he wanted. People would remember this night. They would tell their friends about the crazy homeless man who thought he could play Chopin at Café Luna. They would come back to see if anything else interesting happened. "You know what, folks?" Vincent said, walking in a circle around the piano so everyone could see him clearly. "I think we should give our musician friend here a chance. After all, we believe in supporting the arts, don't we?" A few people clapped, but Vincent could tell they were just being polite. Most of them looked like they were trying not to laugh. Vincent put his hand on Marcus's shoulder in a way that looked friendly, but felt controlling. "Here's what we're going to do," he announced, to the whole restaurant. "If our friend here can actually play something that sounds like music, I'll personally buy him dinner. But if he embarrasses himself and wastes our time—" Vincent paused and looked directly at Marcus. "Then he's banned from this entire street, forever." The restaurant buzzed with excited whispers. Someone said, "This is better than dinner theater." Another person pulled out their phone and started recording. Marcus felt trapped. He could not leave now without looking like a coward. But if he tried to play and failed, he would lose one of the few safe areas where he could sometimes find work or help. "What do you say?" Vincent asked loudly. "Do we have a deal?" Marcus nodded slowly. He did not trust his voice to speak. "Excellent." Vincent clapped his hands together. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce tonight's entertainment. We have here a man who claims to be a musician. He's going to play classical music for us on our beautiful piano." Vincent gestured toward the old, scratched instrument like it was a priceless treasure. "Now I want everyone to listen very carefully. This is going to be educational." The manager walked back to his desk and picked up a small microphone that he used for special announcements. His voice now filled the entire restaurant through hidden speakers. "For those of you who might want to leave early, I understand completely," Vincent said into the microphone. "Classical music isn't for everyone, especially when it's played by someone who learned piano on the streets." The whole restaurant laughed. Marcus felt his stomach twist with hunger and nervousness. Vincent continued his announcement. "But for those brave enough to stay, you're about to witness something truly unique. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our street musician playing what he claims will be Chopin." The applause was loud but mocking. Marcus could hear people whispering about him. "Look at his clothes," said a woman at a nearby table. "His hands are so dirty," said her companion. "This piano probably hasn't been tuned in years," said a man near the window. "Even a real musician couldn't make it sound good." Marcus tried to block out their voices and focus on the piano in front of him. The keys were more yellow than white, and some of them had dark stains that looked like coffee or wine. The bench was wobbly and creaked when he moved, but it was still a piano. The same instrument that had been his best friend for most of his life. Vincent put the microphone down and walked back over to Marcus. "Take your time," he said in a voice that sounded helpful but wasn't really. "We're all very excited to hear what you can do." Marcus placed his hands on the keys and immediately felt how different this piano was from the instruments he used to play. The keys were loose and sticky. Some of them made clicking sounds when he pressed them. The piano was definitely out of tune, just like the customers had said. "Any day now," called out someone from across the restaurant. "We're getting hungry over here." More laughter. Marcus felt sweat forming on his forehead. His left hand, the one damaged in the accident, felt numb and clumsy. The fingers did not want to move the way he told them to. What if he really could not do this anymore? What if 3 years on the streets had made him forget how to play? What if the damage to his nerves was worse than he thought? Marcus had not tried to play a real piano in over a year. The last time was at a music store, and it had gone terribly. His hands shook so badly that he could not even play a simple scale. The store owner asked him to leave. "Is there a problem?" Vincent asked, leaning down close to Marcus's ear. "Having second thoughts? It's not too late to admit this was a mistake." Marcus shook his head. He thought about the food he could smell, coming from the kitchen: warm bread, rich sauces, perfectly cooked meat. His stomach made another painful noise. "No problem," Marcus said quietly. "I'm ready." "Wonderful." Vincent stepped back and addressed the restaurant again. "He says he's ready. Everyone, please put down your forks and give our musician your full attention. This is a moment you'll want to remember." The restaurant became quieter, but Marcus could still hear whispered conversations and the sound of phone cameras recording. He felt like an animal in a zoo, being watched by people who expected him to do something embarrassing. At a table near the front, an elderly couple was watching him with what looked like pity. The woman whispered to her husband, "Should we try to stop this? It seems cruel." But her husband shook his head. "It's his choice," he whispered back. "Maybe he really can play." Marcus heard their conversation and felt a small spark of gratitude. At least someone in the restaurant thought he might succeed. He looked around one more time at all the faces staring at him. Some looked curious, some looked amused, some looked uncomfortable, like they were watching a car accident happen. But most of them looked like they were waiting for a show. They wanted to see him fail so they could feel entertained and superior. Marcus thought about all the concerts he had played in his former life. Audiences full of people who came to hear beautiful music. People who appreciated art and skill and the magic that could happen when someone truly understood their instrument. This was the opposite of that. This was people who wanted to watch someone suffer for their amusement. But Marcus was hungry, and he was desperate, and this was his only chance. He closed his eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to play music that could move people's souls. He tried to remember the feeling of his fingers dancing across keys that responded perfectly to his touch. He tried to remember what it was like to be Marcus Chen, the piano genius, instead of Marcus Chen, the homeless man. When he opened his eyes, his hands were in position over the keys. The restaurant was as quiet as it was going to get. Vincent was standing behind him with that cruel smile, waiting for the show to begin. Marcus took a deep breath and pressed down on the first key of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The note that came out was clear and pure, despite the piano's age and condition. It hung in the air of the restaurant like a question waiting to be answered. Then came the second note, and the third, and Marcus felt something he had not felt in 3 years. He felt like he was coming home. Marcus's finger touched the first key of the old piano, and time seemed to stop. The note that came out was not perfect. The piano was definitely out of tune, just like everyone had said. But there was something about the sound that made the restaurant a little bit quieter. He pressed the second key, then the third. The opening of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major was simple but beautiful, just a few notes that seemed to float in the air. Marcus had played this piece thousands of times in his former life. His fingers knew every note by memory, but now his left hand felt strange and disconnected. The damaged nerves made his fingers move slower than they should. Some of them felt numb, like they were falling asleep. Marcus had to concentrate hard just to make them press the right keys. The first few measures of the piece were shaky. Marcus could hear that his timing was off. His left hand was not keeping up with his right hand. The melody that should flow, like water, was choppy and uncertain. He heard someone in the restaurant whisper, "See? I told you this would be terrible." Another voice said, "How long do we have to listen to this?" Vincent was still standing behind the piano with his arms crossed, that cruel smile still on his face. He looked like he was enjoying every mistake Marcus made, but Marcus kept playing. He had started this and he was going to finish it, no matter how bad it sounded. As he got deeper into the piece, something strange started to happen. His fingers began to remember things his mind had forgotten. Muscle memory that had been sleeping for 3 years began to wake up. His hands started to find their way around the keys without him having to think so hard about every movement. The melody of the Nocturne was one of the most beautiful ever written. Even on this old, out-of-tune piano, with his damaged hand making mistakes, the music still had power. The notes told a story of longing and sadness and hope all mixed together. Marcus found himself getting lost in the music, just like he used to. When he played piano, the rest of the world would disappear. There were no worries, no pain, no fear. There was only the conversation between his fingers and the keys, and the magic that happened when they worked together. His left hand was still clumsy, but it was getting better with each measure. The feeling was starting to come back to some of his fingers. Not completely, but enough to play the simpler parts of the piece. The Nocturne had a section in the middle where the melody became more complex. Marcus's right hand needed to play, Fast, delicate notes while his left hand provided a steady rhythm underneath. This was the part he was most worried about. As he approached that section, Marcus felt his old anxiety creeping back. What if his damaged hand could not handle it? What if he had to stop in the middle of the piece? What if he proved to everyone in the restaurant that he really was just a crazy homeless man who thought he could still do something he used to be good at? But when he reached the complex section, something amazing happened. His hands seemed to take over without waiting for his brain to give them permission. His fingers found the right keys almost automatically. The fast notes came out clean and clear. His left hand provided the perfect rhythm underneath. It was not perfect playing. A professional musician would have noticed the small mistakes and the slightly uneven timing. But it was recognizably Chopin, played with real skill and understanding. The restaurant was getting quieter and quieter. Marcus could no longer hear people whispering or making jokes. The only sounds were the music coming from the piano and the soft noise of the restaurant's normal operations. Dishes clinking in the kitchen, the coffee machine running, the quiet hum of the air conditioning. As Marcus played, he began to remember why he had fallen in love with this piece of music. Chopin had written it during a difficult time in his own life. He was sick and far from home and in love with someone he could not be with. All of those emotions were built into the music, the sadness, the beauty, the longing for something just out of reach. Marcus understood those feelings now in a way he never had when he was young and successful. The longing for a life that seemed impossible to get back, the sadness of losing something precious, the tiny spark of hope that maybe somehow things could be beautiful again. His playing was getting stronger and more confident. His left hand was remembering how to work with his right hand instead of fighting against it. The melody was starting to flow the way it was supposed to. At a table near the window, the elderly woman who had whispered about stopping the performance was no longer eating her dinner. She was staring at Marcus with a strange expression on her face. Her fork was halfway to her mouth, but she seemed to have forgotten about it. The young couple at another table had put their phones away. They were not recording anymore. They were just listening. Even Vincent's cruel smile was starting to fade. The restaurant manager looked confused, like this was not going the way he had expected. Marcus reached the most beautiful part of the nocturne, a section where the melody climbed, higher and higher, like someone reaching up toward the stars. This was the part that always made audiences hold their breath. The part that could make people cry if it was played with enough feeling. Marcus's right hand found the high notes perfectly. His left hand provided the gentle, rolling accompaniment that made the melody seem to float. For just a moment, the old piano sounded almost beautiful. For just a moment, Marcus felt like the musician he used to be. A few people in the restaurant stopped eating completely. Someone near the back put down their wine glass and turned their full attention to the piano. The kitchen staff, who could hear the music through the pass-through window, stopped their work to listen. Marcus was completely lost in the music now. His fingers were moving across the keys with growing confidence. The piece was flowing like a river, carrying him along. He forgot about being hungry. He forgot about being homeless. He forgot about the people watching him and judging him. There was only the music. The nocturne began to wind down toward its gentle ending. The melody became softer and more intimate, like someone saying goodbye to a dear friend. Marcus's hands moved more slowly now, savoring each note. As he played the final measures, Marcus realized that something had changed in the restaurant. The atmosphere was different. People were not whispering or laughing anymore. They were not making jokes or taking pictures. They were listening to music, real music, played with real feeling by someone who understood what the composer had been trying to say. Marcus played the very last note of the piece and let it hang in the air. Then he lifted his hands from the keys and looked up. The restaurant was completely silent. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody seemed to know what to do. Then from a table near the back came the sound of slow clapping. Just one person, applauding quietly but steadily. Then another person joined in. Then another. And then, amazingly, most of the restaurant was clapping. Not the mocking, sarcastic applause from before. Real applause. The kind that said, "Thank you for sharing something beautiful with us." Marcus sat on the wobbly piano bench and stared out at the room full of people. He could not believe what had just happened. He had played music again, real music that moved people. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Chen felt like a musician again. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Marcus sat at the piano bench, his hands still trembling slightly from the effort of playing. He looked out at the restaurant full of people who were clapping for him. Really clapping, not making fun of him. But the person who was clapping the loudest was an elderly woman sitting at a table near the front window. She was probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant style. Her clothes were expensive, but not flashy. She looked like the kind of person who had spent her life around culture and art. While everyone else was clapping politely, this woman was clapping with real excitement. Her eyes were wide, and she kept shaking her head like she could not believe what she had just heard. The applause slowly died down and people began to return to their dinners. But the elderly woman did not stop staring at Marcus. She pulled out her phone and started typing something quickly. Vincent, the restaurant manager, still looked confused. This was not what he had expected to happen. He had thought he would get to humiliate a homeless man for the entertainment of his customers. Instead, the homeless man had just played beautiful music that made everyone stop eating and listen. "Well," Vincent said, and his voice sounded different now, less confident. That was actually not terrible." A few people laughed, but it was not mean laughter this time. It was the kind of laugh people make when they are surprised by something good. Marcus started to stand up from the piano bench. His legs felt weak, partly from hunger and partly from the emotions of playing music again after so long. "Wait," said the elderly woman. She was standing up from her table and walking toward the piano. "Please, don't go anywhere." She moved quickly for someone her age, weaving between tables to get to Marcus. Her phone was still in her hand, and she kept looking from the screen to Marcus's face and back again. "Excuse me," she said when she reached the piano. Her voice had a slight accent that Marcus could not place. "Could you tell me your name?" Marcus hesitated. He had gotten used to being invisible on the streets. Most people did not want to know. Homeless people's names, it made them too real, too human. "Marcus," he said quietly. "Marcus Chen." The woman's face lit up like someone had turned on a bright light inside her. "I knew it," she said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "I knew I recognized that playing." She turned to face the other customers, holding up her phone. "Do you people have any idea who just played for you?" The restaurant got quiet again. People stopped eating and turned to look at the elderly woman and Marcus. "This is Marcus Chen," she announced. "Marcus Chen, the pianist." A few people looked interested but confused. The name did not mean anything to most of them, but the woman was not finished. She looked at her phone again and began to read. "Winner of the Van Cliburn International Piano Competition. Soloist with the New York Philharmonic, the London Symphony, the Berlin Philharmonic. Recording artist with Deutsche Grammophon." Now more people were paying attention. Those were names that even people who did not know much about classical music could recognize. The woman continued reading from her phone. "The New York Times called him the most gifted pianist of his generation. He has played for presidents and kings. He sold out Carnegie Hall 6 times before his 25th birthday." The restaurant was completely silent now. Everyone was staring at Marcus, trying to understand what they were hearing. Vincent looked like someone had just told him that the dirty man sitting at his piano was actually a movie star. "This is impossible," he said. "That can't be right." The elderly woman walked closer to Marcus and spoke more gently. "I heard you play at Lincoln Center 3 years ago," she said. "It was Rachmaninoff's 3rd piano concerto. I have never forgotten that performance. It was perfect." Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes. Someone remembered. Someone had been there during his real life, his former life, when he was still the person he used to be. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," the woman said, extending her hand to Marcus. "I taught music history at Juilliard for 30 years. I know talent when I hear it, and what you just played, That was the same gift that made you famous. Dr. Vasquez turned back to the restaurant. I want everyone here to understand what just happened. You have just heard one of the greatest living pianists play Chopin on an old out-of-tune piano. And he played it beautifully, even though... She looked at Marcus with kind eyes. Even though life has obviously been very difficult for you. People began pulling out their phones and searching for Marcus's name. Within moments, the restaurant was buzzing with whispered conversations as people found videos of his old performances, pictures from his concert days, articles about his career. "Oh my God," said the young woman who had been taking pictures earlier. "Look at this, he's all over YouTube. There are millions of views on some of these videos." "Here's an article from the Washington Post," said another customer. "It says he was one of the most promising classical musicians in the world." "And here's a picture of him playing at the White House," said someone else. Marcus sat at the piano and listened to people discovering who he used to be. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. For 3 years he had been nobody, just another homeless person that people looked through instead of at. Now, suddenly, he was somebody again. But he was also still the same, hungry homeless man he had been 10 minutes ago. Vincent was looking at his phone too, scrolling through articles and videos. His face had gone pale. "This says you played for the Queen of England," he said in a voice that was barely a whisper. "Twice," Dr. Vasquez said proudly, like Marcus was her own grandson. "And for 3 different presidents." A man at a nearby table stood up and started clapping again. "That was incredible," he said. "I mean, I don't know much about classical music, but I could tell that was something special." Other people joined in the applause, but this time it was different. It was not just appreciation for a nice performance. It was awe. They were clapping for someone they now knew was truly great at what he did. Marcus looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at him. The same people who had been laughing at him and expecting him to fail were now looking at him with respect and amazement. But the person who looked the most shocked was Vincent. The restaurant manager was staring at Marcus like he was seeing a ghost. His cruel smile was completely gone, replaced by an expression of horror as he realized what he had done. He had just humiliated one of the world's great musicians in front of a room full of people. He had made fun of a famous artist who had fallen on hard times. And worst of all, some of his customers had recorded the whole thing. Vincent's face was getting redder and redder as he understood how bad this was going to look when people shared those videos online. Dr. Vasquez put her hand gently on Marcus's shoulder. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. "The last time I saw anything about you in the news, you were at the top of your career." Marcus looked down at his dirty hands, resting on the piano keys. How could he explain 3 years of hell to this kind woman who remembered him when he was great? "There was an accident," he said simply. "Car accident. It damaged my hand." He held up his left hand and flexed the fingers that still did not work quite right. "And after that, I couldn't play the way I used to. Everything fell apart. The restaurant was so quiet that everyone could hear his words. People looked at his left hand and began to understand what they had just witnessed. This man had just played beautiful music with a damaged hand. He had just performed Chopin almost perfectly despite being injured, homeless, and hungry. Dr. Vasquez had tears in her eyes now. "But you can still play," she said. "What I just heard was wonderful. Different from before, maybe, but still beautiful. Still you." Marcus looked up at her kind face and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt hope. Dr. Vasquez kept her hand on Marcus's shoulder and spoke to the entire restaurant. "I want everyone here to understand something important," she said in a voice that commanded attention. "What you just witnessed was not just a homeless man playing piano. You witnessed true artistry overcoming incredible obstacles." She turned to look at Vincent, who was still standing behind the piano looking pale and shocked. "This man has played in the greatest concert halls in the world. Presidents and royalty have requested his performances, and you just treated him like he was nothing." Vincent opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He looked around the restaurant at his customers, many of whom were now looking at him with disapproval. Dr. Vasquez continued. Marcus Chen was not just famous, he was special. There are thousands of very good pianists in the world, but there are only a few in each generation who have that extra spark of genius. Marcus was one of them. She pulled out her phone again and found a video. Here, she said, holding it up so people at nearby tables could see. This is him playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. The video showed a younger Marcus dressed in an elegant black tuxedo, sitting at a magnificent grand piano on a stage. His hair was neat, his face was clean, and his eyes were bright with confidence. He looked like a completely different person from the homeless man sitting at the old piano now. But when the video showed his hands moving across the keys, there was no doubt it was the same person. The same graceful movements, the same incredible skill. This performance was called Transcendent by the Boston Globe, Dr. Vasquez said. The New York Times said it was a reminder that some human beings are touched by divine inspiration. People were gathering around her phone to watch the video. Then they would look back at Marcus, trying to understand how the polished performer on the screen had become the desperate man who had just asked to play for food. A middle-aged woman at a table near the window spoke up. I remember reading about you, she said to Marcus. There was an article in a magazine about young classical musicians. You were on the cover. You were supposed to be the future of classical music. Marcus nodded slowly. That feels like a different lifetime, he said quietly. Dr. Vasquez sat down on the piano bench next to Marcus. Tell me about the accident, she said gently. If you're comfortable talking about it. Marcus looked around the restaurant. Everyone was listening, but their faces showed curiosity and concern now, not mockery. These people wanted to understand his story. It was 3 years ago, Marcus began. I was driving home from a concert in Boston. It was late and raining hard. A truck ran a red light and hit my car. He flexed his left hand again. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive, but the nerve damage in my hand, they said it might never heal completely. Dr. Vasquez nodded encouragingly. But that's not the only reason you stopped performing, is it? Marcus shook his head. The physical damage was bad enough, but after the accident, every time I tried to play, I would have panic attacks, my hands would shake. I couldn't concentrate. The doctors called it anxiety disorder. He looked down at the piano keys. I tried to keep performing, but it was a disaster. I made mistakes I had never made before. I would forget pieces I had played hundreds of times. Concert halls started canceling my performances. The restaurant was completely quiet except for Marcus's voice. People had stopped eating. Entirely now. They were listening to his story like it was the most important thing they had ever heard. The money ran out quickly, Marcus continued. Medical bills, canceled contracts, lost income. I had to sell everything. My apartment, my car, even my piano. That was the hardest part, selling my piano. It was a Steinway Grand that I had bought. With my first big paycheck, it was like selling my best friend. Vincent was listening with his mouth open. He had never heard a story like this. He had thought Marcus was just another homeless person making up stories to get free food. Dr. Vasquez asked, well, what about your family? Your friends in the music world? Marcus's face became even sadder. My parents tried to help, but they're retired and don't have much money. And my friends? Most of them are musicians too. They live in a world where you're only as good as your last performance. When I couldn't perform anymore, I became a reminder of what they all feared could happen to them. He paused and took a deep breath. I started drinking to deal with the pain and the fear. That made everything worse. I lost the few teaching jobs I had managed to find. I couldn't pay rent even on a tiny apartment. One morning I woke up on a park bench and realized I was homeless. A woman at a nearby table was crying now. Other people looked shocked and sad. They were beginning to understand how far Marcus had fallen, and how cruel their laughter had been just a few minutes earlier. Dr. Vasquez put her arm around Marcus's shoulders. But you can still play, she said firmly. What I just heard proves that, yes, it's different from before, but it's still beautiful, still moving, still you. Marcus looked up at her with surprise. But I made so many mistakes. My left hand is still clumsy. I can't play the really difficult pieces anymore. So what? Dr. Vasquez said. Do you think music is only about technical perfection? Do you think the only value of a musician is how fast they can play scales? She stood up and addressed the whole restaurant again. I have heard thousands of technically perfect performances that left me cold. But what Marcus just played had something those performances didn't have. It had soul. It had lived experience. It had truth. She turned back to Marcus. Your playing tonight was more moving than your performance 3 years ago, and that one was magnificent. Because now you understand something about life that you didn't understand then. You understand loss and struggle, and what it means to have everything taken away. Marcus felt tears running down his face. For 3 years, he had thought his musical career was completely over. He had thought the accident had destroyed not just his hand, but his identity as a musician. But Dr. Vasquez was telling him that his music was still valuable. Different, but still valuable. Here's what we're going to do, Dr. Vasquez said, pulling out her phone again. I still have connections in the music world. I'm going to make some calls. There are people who would love to hear you play again, even if it's not the same as before. She started typing on her phone. And I'm going to post that video I just took on social media. People need to see this. They need to know that Marcus Chen is still making music. Vincent finally found his voice. Mr. Chen, he said, and his voice was shaking. I owe you an enormous apology. I had no idea who you were, I thought. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Marcus looked up at the restaurant manager who had been so cruel to him just a short time ago. Vincent looked genuinely horrified by his own behavior. It's okay, Marcus said quietly. You didn't know. No, it's not okay, Vincent said firmly. Even if you had just been a regular homeless person, what I did was wrong. But the fact that you're you, this is going to haunt me forever. Dr. Vasquez was still typing on her phone. I'm sending this video to my former colleagues at Juilliard and to some friends at the New York Times. This story needs to be told. She looked up at Marcus with excitement in her eyes. Marcus, I think your comeback starts tonight. As if to prove her point, people in the restaurant started taking out their phones and sharing videos of Marcus's performance. Within minutes, the story was spreading across social media. Marcus Chen, the lost piano genius, had been found, and his music was still magic. 3 months later, Marcus stood behind the curtain at the Riverside Community Center, listening to the crowd of people filling the seats in the small auditorium. His hands were clean now, and his hair was cut and neat. He wore a simple black suit that Dr. Vasquez had helped him buy. But most importantly, his eyes had hope in them again. The video of his performance at Café Luna had spread around the world in just a few days. Millions of people watched the homeless man play beautiful music on an old piano. News stations picked up the story. Magazines wrote articles about his fall and his rediscovery. But the most important thing that happened was that Dr. Vasquez kept her promise. She made phone calls to everyone she knew in the music world. She told them that Marcus Chen was ready to play again, even if he was different than before. Some people were skeptical. They remembered the Marcus Chen from before the accident, the perfect technique, the flawless performances. They wondered if this new version of Marcus could live up to those memories. But Dr. Vasquez organized this comeback concert to prove them wrong. It was not at Carnegie Hall or Lincoln Center. It was at a small community center in a neighborhood where many homeless people lived. The tickets were free, and anyone could come. Marcus had spent the last 3 months preparing for this night. Dr. Vasquez connected him with a specialist who helped him work with his damaged hand. The doctor taught him exercises and techniques that helped him regain some of the feeling and control he had lost. More importantly, Dr. Vasquez connected him with a therapist who helped him deal with the anxiety and fear that had paralyzed him since the accident. Slowly, Marcus learned to make friends with his imperfections instead of fighting against them. The repertoire for tonight's concert was carefully chosen. No more impossibly difficult pieces that required perfect technique. Instead, Marcus would play music that told stories, pieces that were about emotion and expression, rather than showing off technical skill. Vincent, the restaurant manager who had been so cruel to Marcus, had surprised everyone by becoming one of his biggest supporters. The guilt over how he had treated Marcus drove Vincent to help in any way he could. He used his business connections to help sponsor the concert. He even closed Cafe Luna for the evening so his entire staff could attend. Now, standing behind the curtain, Marcus could hear Vincent in the audience telling anyone who would listen about the night when a genius played piano in his restaurant, and he was too ignorant to recognize greatness. Dr. Vasquez appeared at Marcus's side. She was wearing an elegant black dress and looked excited but nervous. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Marcus flexed his left hand and smiled. "Different than I used to feel before concerts," he said. "Before, I was always afraid of making mistakes. Tonight, I'm not afraid of that anymore." Dr. Vasquez looked confused. "You're not afraid of making mistakes?" Marcus shook his head. "My therapist helped me understand something. When I was young and perfect, I thought music was about never making mistakes. But now I know that music is about telling the truth. And the truth is that life is not perfect. People are not perfect, so why should music be perfect?" Through a gap in the curtain, Marcus could see the audience. There were music critics and professional musicians who had come to see if the great Marcus Chen could still play. But there were also homeless people from the shelters, families from the neighborhood, and people who had seen the video online and wanted to hear him play in person. In the front row, Marcus could see the little girl from Boston, the one who had asked for his autograph 3 years ago. Her mother had seen the news stories and brought her daughter to the concert. The girl was now 11 years old and still taking piano lessons. She was holding a program and looking at the stage with excitement. Dr. Vasquez squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "It's time," she said. Marcus walked out onto the stage and sat down at the piano. It was a good instrument, not as fancy as the grand pianos he used to play, but properly tuned and well-maintained. The audience applauded politely as he settled onto the bench. Marcus looked out at all the faces looking back at him. 3 years ago, he would have seen them as judges who expected perfection. Tonight, he saw them as friends who had come to share music with him. He began with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same piece he had played at Cafe Luna. But this time, his performance was more confident and relaxed. His left hand still moved slower than his right, and he still made small mistakes that a professional critic might notice. But the music was beautiful and heartfelt. When he finished the Chopin, the audience applauded warmly. Marcus could see. People in the front rows had tears in their eyes. Next, he played a simple Bach piece that he had loved since childhood. Then a Debussy composition that painted pictures of moonlight on water. Each piece was chosen not to show off his technical skills, but to share emotions and stories. For his final piece, Marcus had chosen something special. It was a composition he had written himself during the darkest days of being homeless. He had hummed it to himself while sleeping in doorways and shelters. It was a song about losing everything and finding hope again. As he played his own composition, Marcus felt completely free for the first time in years. This music came from his heart, not from years of technical training. It told the story of his journey from success to failure to finding a new kind of success. When the last note faded away, the audience was silent for a moment. Then they exploded in applause. People stood up and clapped and cheered. Some were crying, some were smiling. All of them had been touched by what they had just heard. Marcus stood up and bowed to the audience. He saw Vincent wiping tears from his eyes. He saw Dr. Vasquez applauding proudly like a mother watching her son graduate. He saw the little girl from Boston clapping enthusiastically and whispering to her mother. But most importantly, Marcus saw people who had been moved by music. Real music that came from real experience and real emotion. After the concert, people came up to talk to Marcus. The professional musicians told him his playing was different from before, but just as powerful. The homeless people thanked him for showing that their lives had value and beauty. The critics wrote reviews saying that Marcus Chen had found a new voice that was deeper and more meaningful than his old one. Dr. Vasquez was right. This was the beginning of Marcus's comeback. But it was not a comeback to his old life. It was the beginning of a new life, one where he understood that greatness in music comes not from perfection, but from truth. 3 months after playing for food in a restaurant, Marcus Chen was a musician again. Different than before, but still magical. Still able to touch people's hearts with the power of music. And for the first time in 3 years, when Marcus went to sleep that night, it was in his own bed, in his own small apartment, with a piano, in the corner, and hope in his heart. The little girl from Boston had been right to want to be like Marcus Chen. Not because he was perfect, but because he had learned that the most beautiful music comes from the most difficult struggles, and that true artistry can never be destroyed no matter how far someone falls.